Hello, I'm Mark Price. I'd like to talk to you today about discernment. Discernment is one important aspect of self-examination, which I spoke of yesterday. Discernment is where contemplation and action meet. The gospel today is Luke chapter 6, verses 39 to 42. Jesus told his disciples a parable. Can a blind person guide a blind person? Will not both fall into a pit? No disciple is superior to the teacher, but when fully trained, every disciple will be like his teacher. Why do you notice the splinter in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the wooden beam in your own? How can you say to your brother, "Brother, let me remove that splinter in your eye," when you do not even notice the wooden beam in your own eye? You hypocrite! Remove the wooden beam from your eye first, then you will see clearly to remove the splinter in your brother's eye. The Gospel of the Lord. So today, the very familiar phrase, this is a continuation of Luke's Sermon on the Plain, where he's talking to the disciples about leadership and discerning themselves as leaders and how to make the right choices and how to be better examples, and discernment is part of that process. But today is 9/11, September 11th, 2020. It is 19 years to the day that the United States was attacked by Islamic terrorists, extremists, who took 4 planes, commandeered 4 jets, passenger jets, flew 2 of them into the towers, Twin Towers in New York City, 1 of them into the Pentagon, and the 4th one they were supposedly going to be taking and flying into the Capitol or the White House. But because of some great heroes in America who took over and said, let's not just sit here, let's do something about this. I think the term was, let's roll. That plane ended up crashing into a field in Pennsylvania. So on this day, we remember the thousands who perished on that day and the family, the friends who were left behind. It was devastating. But what I remember in addition to that are 2 things. One is a lesson that we can learn, and that is about forgiveness. It says that in many of the cases when people knew they were going to die, whether it was in the airplane or it was in one of the towers, the one thing that they all had in common, 2 things. One was connect with God, whatever God was to them. The second thing was connect with family, loved ones, friends. And the most common phrase they said that was used was, I love you, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. One woman, and this story I guess happened many times among different people who died that day, she called her sister, who she hadn't spoken to in 40 years, and just couldn't stop saying, I'm sorry, I love you, and crying and crying. Neither of them could remember why they stopped talking 40 years before, but all they could do is cry and pray for each other's forgiveness. Why is it that sometimes it takes being at that point when nothing else matters before we realize what really does matter? The other thing I remember from 9/11 was how the politicians in the United States came together. I remember them holding hands on the steps of Congress. I remember them saying a prayer. I remember them singing in unison together, saying, we are one America, we're going to stand strong. That is how a country should act. That is how leaders should act when faced with emergencies, when faced with, in this case, a terrorist attack. But lately we've been facing another terrorist attack, this time a pandemic. And instead of coming together, the leadership has done completely the opposite. They've drawn their lines in the sand and they said, it's my way or the highway. You're going to do it my way. I won't do anything if it's your idea. It has to be my idea. This is not what leadership's about. These people today, the leaders in the United States today, are like the blind leading the blind in today's gospel. You've got one side that's blind and they're leading other people down a false path because they're not seeing their hate, their anger, their hunger for power is completely blinding them to what really needs to be done in this nation. And Jesus says in today's gospel that the blind can't lead the blind. We have to discern what our role should be. Our leaders should be discerning their role at the time of this pandemic. And that role should be to lead us out of it, to lead us together as a country, to come together as a country. And it starts by their example coming together first. But the leaders are so busy looking at the plank and looking at the speck and looking at the problems with the other people that they don't see the beams in their own eyes. They don't see their own problems. They're too busy pointing out everybody else's. This is not what we're called to do. Jesus is saying, to be a leader, you have to be people who discern your gifts, your talents. You have to discern what is wrong with you before you can help somebody else. We have to discern what our shortcomings are before we can help other people. Sadly, we have leadership in today's world that thinks they do no wrong, that they're perfect, and their way is the only way. And that is certainly not what we saw after 9/11. We saw a coming together. In today's world, we're seeing a complete separation. People are focused on their own greed, their own desire for money and power, and they're not discerning what they should be doing. They're not discerning the real nature of leadership and how they're called to leadership in their own lives. So today's gospel is pointing us in the right direction. Blind can't lead the blind. You can't lead other people if you're blinded by your own hatred, your own rage, your own desire for power. You cannot help other people. You cannot lead if you're so busy looking at the peg in somebody else's eye that you're not seeing the beam coming out of your own eye. Let us learn from Jesus today that the best way to be leaders in our personal lives, in our community life, in our national life, in our international life, is to be people who discern what it means to be a leader, what it means to be a person of faith, and then stand strong and realize that we're an example, whether we want to be or not. And it's up to us whether we're a good example or a bad example. This is Mark Price. Thanks for listening.